The officers froze in the dim storage unit corridor, the beam of a single flashlight trembling over a dust-coated box, labeled only with a date and initials, inside which rested one Polaroid photograph that felt colder than the December air, its image unsettling in its stark stillness. That night alone. If you like stories like this, make sure to subscribe and like the video. The discovery in Sacramento in late 1998 did not begin with a body, a witness, or even a formal missing person call. It began with the Polaroid. Investigators noted that the snapshot captured a young woman seated near a recognizable downtown mural, her expression neutral, posture fixed, and the timestamp smudged but legible enough to place it at the midpoint of the previous summer. No blood, no force, no immediate crime implied, yet something in her static pose drew forensic attention. The image had been left deliberately, stored and sealed. This was not a keepsake but an item withheld, archived as if evidence by someone who should not have had it. Local records soon matched the woman in the Polaroid with a missing person registered weeks after the date on the photograph. 22-year-old college intern and part-time bookstore clerk, Emily Price. Her disappearance in July had been overshadowed by more publicized cases in Northern California, and although flyers and campus bulletins circulated for months, few leads persisted past the initial search. Sacramento's summer heat, busy intersections, and student turnover created a blur of comings and goings too dense to isolate one exit from the city. She had last been seen leaving a shift near Capitol Mall, walking toward her modest apartment on a well-lit street. There were no witnesses claiming she entered a vehicle, argued with anyone, or showed distress. She simply did not arrive home, and the following day her landlord reported her absence after noticing uncollected mail and lights left on. Detectives at the time classified the case as suspicious, yet lacked actionable evidence. With no forced entry, no immediate financial withdrawals, and no communications after the night she vanished, her file gradually grew cold. That Polaroid in the storage unit, however, reopened every archived page. The unit itself had been seized during an unrelated property dispute, and its anonymous labeling suggested a private rental under a pseudonym. Receipts indicated cash payments spanning 6 months, ceasing abruptly just after October. The timing aligned too precisely with Emily's disappearance to be dismissed as coincidence. Forensic technicians scanned the photograph for fingerprints, fibers, any trace that could anchor identity. A partial latent print was lifted from the glossy edge, insufficient alone for confirmation, but potentially valuable if compared against a suspect in future. The background of the image, once magnified, revealed a narrow section of the mural bearing chipped paint and faded lettering. Investigators canvassed Sacramento's central art districts until the specific wall was located in an alley used frequently by local photographers for portfolio work. Shop owners remembered seeing Emily earlier that week browsing used books and film reels, but no witness reported seeing her accompanied or approached. To understand Emily, analysts reconstructed her timeline from the months before her disappearance. She lived simply, maintained steady employment, and kept close ties with family in Redding, calling weekly without fail. She had no documented conflicts, financial pressures, or high-risk associations. Her academic advisor described her as diligent, often early for morning lectures, committed to a quiet career in archival research. None of this advanced the investigation. What mattered was linking the Polaroid to the person who stored it, and determining why Emily sat so still in its frame. Detectives turned toward the storage facility's logs. A single name appeared irregularly across sign-in sheets: Daniel Shore, age 34, freelance photographer known for street portraits and candid urban scenes. Shore had once taught a weekend photography seminar at the same college Emily attended, though records showed no direct enrollment connection. His address listed a modest duplex near Old Sacramento, and his business card, found in the storage box beneath the Polaroid, cited expertise in analog formats. Interviews with artists in the area yielded cautious remarks about Shore's solitary demeanor and preference for unplanned, unsanctioned photo subjects. Nothing criminal, yet notably detached. Before Shore could be questioned, investigators sought corroboration through his work archives. A search warrant permitted examination of film negatives stored in his home office. Roll after roll depicted anonymous faces, commuters, dancers, street vendors, all legally captured in public spaces. Embedded among them, however, were 2 additional shots of Emily, both taken weeks apart, neither requested nor signed. She was shown reading on a park bench, walking near the riverfront, unaware of the lens. These images, combined with the Polaroid in the storage unit, shifted the case classification from missing person to potential stalking and unlawful surveillance. Detectives moved cautiously. Surveillance logs from Shore's neighborhood indicated irregular late-night departures aligned with dates Emily had been spotted downtown. Phone records placed him within the tower range near her apartment on the night she vanished. None of it confirmed direct involvement, but each thread pulled taut the network of circumstantial indicators. The district attorney approved a controlled interview, during which Shore responded minimally, citing artistic collection habits as explanation for his subjects. Legally, the photos alone could not implicate him in her disappearance, yet investigators pressed silently forward, convinced the Polaroid had been preserved intentionally, not forgotten. In December, cadaver dogs were deployed across several alleys and storage lots connected to Shore's known routes. One search, near the defunct rail yard south of the river channel, produced a weather-worn pendant identified by Emily's mother as a graduation gift. Soil analysis suggested the item had been present for months, consistent with summer disposal. Additional excavation yielded no remains, but the pendant reoriented investigative strategy. If Emily had been harmed, the perpetrator had moved carefully and left minimal trace. Winter rainfall slowed fieldwork, yet forensic labs accelerated fiber comparison. Threads lifted from the storage box matched fibers from Shore's apartment carpeting. This placed the Polaroid, and likely its subject, within his domestic environment at some point. Furthermore, rental receipts connected him definitively to the storage unit. The rush of media attention renewed in early January, as local papers revisited Emily's unsolved case with cautious phrasing, highlighting the disturbing photographic trail without asserting criminal guilt. A break emerged when technicians re-examined the Polaroid timestamp under enhanced spectral light. The faint digits revealed a secondary imprint, a camera clock variation indicating the image had been taken not in mid-July, but days after her recorded disappearance. This detail altered the entire investigative frame. Emily had not vanished on the night assumed. She had still been alive afterward, positioned in front of that mural under unknown control or influence. The stillness in her face, once interpreted as neutral, now suggested constraint, absence of agency. Pressure mounted to account for her final whereabouts. Shore remained under observation. His financial history disclosed a single purchased train ticket to Reno dated weeks after Emily's last verified sighting. Field agents coordinated with Nevada authorities to inspect motels near the arrival station. Records from a roadside lodge confirmed Shore's check-in, and a housekeeping log referenced a discarded roll of undeveloped film. That film, when retrieved and processed, contained blurred exposures of highway shoulders and desert outskirts. One frame, though indistinct, bore an outline resembling Emily's silhouette against a motel curtain. The grain obscured certainty, but the implication was unmistakable. She had traveled with him, willingly or otherwise. As winter deepened, the investigation ceased to rely on speculation. Linguistic analysis of Shore's written notes found in his residence, brief, unemotional location memos, suggested a deliberate mapping of Emily's movements. Landmarks matched earlier sightings: bookstore, mural, rail yard. Combined, they constructed a pattern of tracking rather than accidental encounter. The Polaroid was no memento, it was documentation. By March, the cold file had transformed into a prosecutable case, though Emily's precise fate remained undocumented. The documentary tone of the evidence, the clinical accumulation of her likeness, and the absence of communication post-dated by the Polaroid timestamp led prosecutors to pursue charges of unlawful restraint, stalking, and homicide without recovered remains, supported by circumstantial forensic proof. Shore maintained silence, offering neither confession nor contest, but his legal counsel conceded probability of conviction under the weight of digital and analog record correlations. In late spring 1999, the Superior Court issued its verdict: guilty on all counts. The storage unit, the Polaroid, the pendant, and the silent chronology of Emily's last recorded months formed a coherent narrative of predation hidden beneath artistic pretense. Without spectacle, without headline sensationalism, the case concluded in a quiet sentencing: life imprisonment without parole. Sacramento moved forward, its alley murals repainted, its summer foot traffic resumed. Emily's family held a small memorial by the riverfront, where her final unguarded photograph had once been taken, before the lens that changed everything found her. The years following the conviction did not bring the clarity the Price family hoped for. Although the legal definition of the crime was affirmed, the absence of physical remains left a void impossible to categorize. Sacramento newspapers gradually reduced coverage, shifting from front-page urgency to occasional anniversary mentions. But within the homicide division, the case remained a reference point for what could be proven through photography, timestamp correction, and methodical forensic linkage without a direct scene of death. Investigators had not constructed a narrative of panic or violence. Rather, they assembled a timeline of quiet containment, controlled proximity, and calculated disappearance. It was this subtlety, this unbroken calm, that continued to unsettle even the most seasoned detectives. Evidence from the storage unit was reassessed over the next 2 years, not because the verdict was in question, but because the department wanted to codify procedural improvements. The discovery of the Polaroid had been purely incidental, revealed during a property seizure unrelated to the case it would ultimately solve. Officers began recommending expanded searches of abandoned units and delayed rental payments in missing person cases, convinced now that personal archives often hide more than valuables. The cardboard box that held Emily's image became a symbol of unintentional disclosure, a perpetrator's meticulous record-keeping undone by a simple rental dispute. In 2001, a new forensic cataloging method was adopted, incorporating humidity-resistant storage and enhanced spectral scanning for date reconstruction. Emily's photograph served as the training model, its timestamp still the critical hinge in the prosecutorial timeline. Experts noted that Polaroid film, during exposure and development, recorded more than surface light. It preserved environmental trace materials imperceptible to the naked eye but crucial under magnified decomposition analysis. Microparticles embedded in the image's lower corner matched airborne particulates later sampled from Shore's home vent system. This secondary match, quiet, small, and scientifically precise, reinforced the legitimacy of the original conviction. Families of other missing women from the region began requesting comparisons. Most yielded nothing, but one case from 1996, involving a 23-year-old independent musician, produced 2 frames of street-level photography within Shore's negatives. Unlike Emily, no direct connection existed between that individual and the rental unit, nor any timestamp proving post-disappearance contact. Investigators maintained that correlation did not constitute causation. Nonetheless, the archival review prompted a reassessment of prior witness statements, leading to clearer protocols for documenting citizens photographed without consent. Sacramento's creative district, once celebrated for spontaneous street imagery, evolved into a more regulated environment, requiring explicit permission for certain forms of portraiture. Meanwhile, Shore remained in correctional custody at Folsom State Prison, filing no appeals and granting no interviews. Psychological evaluations classified him as nonviolent, methodical, and resistant to introspection. He exhibited no agitation, no remorse, and no denial. His cell contained only a limited collection of books on analog photography, none of which included notes, margin markings, or personal history. It was his neutrality that unsettled evaluators, neither defensive nor confessional, neither provocative nor withdrawn. In reports, prison psychologists noted that his engagement with subjects reflected not obsession but archiving instinct, a compositional impulse to preserve human presence without relational acknowledgement. For Emily's parents, memorial practices remained simple. Each July, they mailed a small donation to the university archival department she once interned for, earmarked for preservation research. Her mother retained no framed photos of Emily past childhood. Any image close to adulthood, especially those approaching the year she disappeared, felt too near the Polaroid, too similar in poise and posture. Her father occasionally revisited Capitol Mall, tracing her final known route on quiet Sunday mornings, avoiding times when foot traffic would obscure the distance she covered that evening in 1998. He never visited the mural site again. It had been repainted twice, first in vibrant coastal blues and later in subdued earth tones, but the shape of the alley remained unchanged. Its dimensions, the angle of light at dusk, and the narrow stretch of wall where Emily had once sat ensured that memory required no pigment to persist. Police records show that the case continued to influence procedural training through the early 2000s. Recruits were taught to examine missing person timelines with attention to photographic evidence, not as supplemental material, but as central investigative anchor points. Instructors emphasized that photography, especially analog forms, possesses documentary permanence that text messages, surveillance feeds, and digital logs cannot replicate. A Polaroid captures presence stripped of metadata, but enriched with environmental residue. It cannot be deleted, edited, or misdated without leaving chemical trace signatures. Emily's image thus became a foundational tool in understanding how absence is sometimes proven not through discovery, but through irrefutable record of continued existence after presumed disappearance. Sacramento itself changed slowly. The rail yard south of the river, once expansive and unused, was converted into a mixed commercial district featuring small cafes and boutique studios. Construction teams periodically unearthed relics of older infrastructure, but never located additional items tied to the case. The pendant recovered during the initial search remained the only physical artifact linking Shore to Emily outside of film. It was housed in a temperature-controlled drawer at the county evidence facility, cataloged with restrained commentary and no public display. Detectives declined requests for photographs or exhibition, citing privacy and the symbolic weight of the object. It was not a clue to be studied further, but a piece of closure already served. Regional universities incorporated the case into criminal justice ethics coursework, focusing on non-invasive surveillance boundaries and the duty to report patterns of unsolicited documentation. Students confronted the ambiguity that surrounded Emily's initial disappearance. No witness, no struggle, no exchange. She vanished not through force visible to bystanders, but through careful, imperceptible redirection of her routine. Shore's conviction proved legal culpability. It did not yield psychological explanation. Thus, the case served as a sober study in how forensic science can answer legal questions without fulfilling emotional ones. By 2005, advancements in microprint recovery enabled further refinement of the partial fingerprint lifted from the Polaroid edge. The trace, once insufficient for confirmatory match, now aligned conclusively with Shore's right index. Although the legal verdict no longer required reinforcement, the precision satisfied investigators who had pursued resolution on both judicial and procedural levels. Their notes emphasized the measured satisfaction of knowing that even if the storage unit had never opened, even if the Polaroid had remained sealed for decades, the eventual technological reach of forensic tools would have uncovered its owner. The documentary community revisited the case periodically, but coverage remained restrained. No sensational reenactments, no dramatic scoring, no speculative commentary. The tone aligned with the original investigative posture, factual, chronological, and quietly disquieting. Analysts remarked that the defining feature of the case was its subdued nature. Unlike other cold crimes punctuated by public panic or dramatic discovery scenes, Emily's narrative unfolded in stillness and archive, in items tucked away rather than flaunted. The Price family, in time, moved from Redding to coastal Oregon, seeking distance without erasure. They agreed to no interviews beyond formal statements and maintained no commemorative website or public narrative. Their grief, confirmed legally yet unresolved bodily, remained private. Their final written release to Sacramento media in 2006 comprised 12 lines. It thanked investigators for diligence, recognized the court's decision, and stated simply that Emily's life would be remembered in quiet forms, appropriate to who she was. Within the Sacramento Homicide Unit, senior detectives occasionally referenced the case during internal review sessions. It served as a reminder that solved does not equate recovered, and that closure, in legal terms, may never mirror closure in human terms. The Polaroid, the storage unit, and the quiet absence of conflict formed a model for future examinations of disappearance without spectacle. Through these years, Shore aged with silent predictability inside institutional walls. No infractions, no petitions, no requests for media correspondence. The photograph he once stored as record became the singular artifact defining his historical existence beyond his own will. It did not portray guilt, nor violence, nor fear. It portrayed presence out of time. An image capturing a young woman who did not know that this frame would become the only verified proof of her continued life. After the moment, the world believed she had already vanished. The official record, now complete, reflects no myth, no embellishment. Just Sacramento streets under summer heat, a bookstore, a mural alley, a storage unit, and a Polaroid preserved beyond intention. The official designation of resolution came not with ceremony, but with administrative precision. In 2007, the final appellate window closed, confirming that Daniel Shore would remain incarcerated without eligibility for parole. The district attorney's office prepared a succinct closure memorandum, summarizing the case in measured legal phrasing. a disappearance reconstructed through photographic chronology, indirect trace evidence, and the subtle but incontrovertible certainty of documented presence beyond the point of presumed absence. No speculation, no psychological theorizing, no narrative embellishment. The memorandum was filed, stamped, and archived in a climate-controlled stack of resolved homicides, where dust and deterioration could not alter its facts. Yet investigators, years later, continued to reflect on the fragile path that led to resolution. If the rental unit dispute had not escalated to seizure, if the cardboard box had remained sealed, if shifting property codes had delayed inspection by even a few more months, the Polaroid might have been discarded during routine facility clearing. Time, in its procedural indifference, nearly erased evidence before the justice system had the chance to recognize it. That bureaucratic timing, not instinct, intuition, or witness testimony, had served as the critical axis for solving a disappearance obscured by ordinary city rhythms and quiet photographic intent. The Sacramento Police Department expanded its missing person protocol in direct response. Unclaimed storage units linked to unresolved disappearances were now subjected to forensic audit before auction or disposal. This measure, though rarely producing actionable evidence, mirrored the case's lessons, that static artifacts, especially those curated privately and without audience, can form the spine of a criminal narrative otherwise invisible. Emily Price's Polaroid was never meant for display, publication, or artistic evaluation. It was preserved only for the individual who created and withheld it. The intentional isolation of the photograph, sealed without declaration, offered a rare forensic profile of controlled documentation, observation over engagement, capture over contact, archiving over interaction. Years passed, and Sacramento transformed. Residential developments replaced the aging warehouses that once framed the city's industrial corridors. The mural alley where Emily had been positioned in 1998 was eventually demolished to accommodate new retail construction. By the time concrete foundations were poured for modern storefronts, only retired detectives remembered the precise angle of wall and afternoon light where her stillness had been fixed on film. Though no physical marker acknowledged the site, its coordinates remained carefully annotated in case records, preserved not for public commemoration but for internal continuity. A place can disappear, investigators noted, yet remain permanently locatable in documentation. The storage facility, too, ceased operation. In 2010, its remaining units were dismantled, their contents legally vetted, auctioned, or destroyed according to state directive. The corridor where officers first paused over the unremarkable cardboard box existed now only in testimony transcripts, investigative photographs, and memory outlines retained by those who participated in the seizure. Even the smell of dust, the December chill, and the muted fluorescent flicker became intangible, yet the Polaroid remained, climate-stabilized and chemically inert, its silent subject fixed at a moment both known and unknowable. Forensic innovation continued indirectly shaped by the case. Researchers studying analog image degradation referenced Emily's photograph for controlled testing of particulate transfer and timestamp compression, not for public display or narrative retelling, but for method calibration. The image became a scientific object, a chemically stable witness more reliable than recollection, rumor, or retrospective interpretation. In academic journals, its existence appeared only as coded reference. Evidence Sample 98 SB21, Polaroid Type 600, uncontrolled urban exposure. No name, no face, no narrative, only chemical composition and forensic utility. Within corrections, Shore remained unchanged in his unresponsiveness to external inquiry. His behavior profile stabilized at neutral compliance, with no disciplinary incidents or communicative overtures. Evaluators noted that his interior life, if one existed beyond procedural function, remained inaccessible. He neither rejected nor acknowledged the narrative constructed by legal proceedings. His presence, like his photographs, offered no commentary. Time for him passed without exhibition. As digital culture accelerated, analysts revisited the case as a counterpoint to modern traceability. Emily's disappearance occurred just before widespread surveillance saturation, before geotagging, before ubiquitous smartphone records. The analog nature of her final documented presence provided a stark contrast to later cases solved through metadata accumulation rather than physical documentation. A single print, captured at a precise moment under direct light, preserved more investigative consequence than countless contemporary digital frames capable of deletion. Photographic permanence in her case was not aesthetic but evidentiary. Families of the missing across California and beyond sometimes reached out quietly to the department, not seeking comparison, but seeking assurance that if their loved one's traces ever emerged after years of silence, they would be recognized with similar procedural fidelity. The department, in formal response, offered no emotional projection, only structural confidence. That evidence, however delayed, would be received without dismissal. Not every disappearance could conclude with conviction, they acknowledged, but no artifact would be disregarded solely for arriving late. The Price family, still private in their grief, retained only minimal connection to the city where their daughter spent her final months. They maintained correspondence with the university's Archival Sciences Fund, continuing their annual donation without signature flourish. Their choice not to advocate publicly, not to participate in televised retellings or victim-centered features, was respected and preserved. Nothing about their daughter's last chapter belonged to spectacle. She moved through the world with quiet consistency, and the city chose to honor that steadiness with procedural restraint. Sacramento homicide training modules still reference Emily's case, not for emotional resonance, but for instructional rigor. New detectives study the chain of custody, the incremental assembly of circumstantial threads, and the disciplined refusal to speculate beyond evidential parameters. They examine how the absence of certain forensic anchors, scene, remains, confession, did not impede resolution when alternative anchors presented themselves through photographic fact and environmental trace conformity. The case demonstrates the discipline required to treat stillness not as void, but as data. It remains notable, even decades on, that resolution emerged from objects intentionally concealed rather than intentionally displayed. The Polaroid was not a message, warning, or taunt. It was a private record withheld from circulation, stored without destruction, preserved without acknowledgement. Had the unit remained rented, had the payments continued, its status might have remained indefinitely dormant. This awareness informs modern investigative philosophy, that some evidence exists not to be found, but merely to exist until administrative interruption reveals it. With the final archival updates completed and all evidentiary items cataloged under long-term retention schedule, the case now rests within official closure status. The classification does not resolve tragedy, nor claim narrative fulfillment. It asserts only what the law requires. That truth, when located, must be recorded with precision and devoid of interpretive flourish. Sacramento continues in its seasonal cycles. Winter fog along the river, summer heat pressing against pavement, students gathering near Capitol Mall, commuters crossing intersections as Emily once did. The city does not speak of her disappearance, nor of the photograph that returned her to legal presence. It does not need to. The record endures independently, preserved with clinical exactness in a sealed drawer where temperature, humidity, and time remain controlled. Emily Price's final documented image persists unchanged, immune to revision. Not in public view, not in circulating narrative, but in silent, unaltered archive. It is neither memorial nor exhibit. It is evidence, resolute in its stillness, completing the case that began not with discovery of remains, but with a Polaroid waiting, unmarked, in a storage unit corridor during a cold December inspection long ago.